The secret to digital brand innovation. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Kitty Boo in Shanghai. Digital media gives brand owners a valuable tool to communicate with consumers, but most marketers barely scratch the surface of its capabilities, leaving an enormous gap between the opportunity and the approach. Very few brands today have a coherent, ambitious plan to use digital channels to inject innovation in the consumer journey by fundamentally changing the way people look for products, buy products, and use products. Digital is seen as yet another channel, not as a driver of innovation, turning into a poor relation of retail or traditional marketing. This week on Thoughtful China, our experts will tell you how to bring more innovation to your brand building. And Stella Jamie Lui will share a thought or two about how marketers should innovate through the digitalization of everyday objects. But first with us in the studio today is Kevin Gentle, Digital Strategy Director at Labbrand. Kevin, thanks for coming in today.
Nice to be here.
Kevin, we're talking about digital innovation today, but first of all, what is the common approach of digital of brands? Do they view it as a platform, a channel, or do they see it really as a driver of innovation?
Well, you have several problems with the way brands approach digital, well, most brands, that is. The first problem is that when you say digital, 80% of people will think about digital marketing or e-distribution. So right there, you have a problem in that we're not seeing all of the applications. And one of the reasons for which we're not seeing all of the applications is because when most people talk about digital, they consider the channel, they consider the technology. But what they don't consider is that behind the technology, behind the channels, behind the content, the applications, you have the strategy. So what do I want to do as a brand and as a business? And you have people. And that part of the equation is probably the most important. You have the people. What is the customer journey? How do people behave all along the customer journey? Where are the pain points? And right now the issue is that technology is disconnected from strategy and people. So you can't exploit the full potential of digital if you don't link these two sides of the equation together. So what I like to say is that a lot of brands right now, their relationship with digital is kind of like you switch from a feature phone to an iPhone, but you use that iPhone only to make calls and send text messages, instead of using it to its full potential to change the way you live, to increase your productivity, etc., etc.
I do find that example very interesting because I recently made a purchase of an iMac. It's been sitting at home, and what I use it for is mainly emails. So I find that a great sort of waste of the machine that's sitting in front of you. It is a very accurate description, yeah. Yeah. So I hear people talk a lot about their digital strategy being having a Weibo account, a WeChat account, and covering space on Tmall, and they think that's a pretty solid strategy. Do you agree with that?
It's a start in that it's a presence. And we often have clients, we go to talk to them and they say, oh, you know, we don't really need a digital strategy because we have this and that, and we have this checklist approach. And in a way it's normal because a lot of brands are not mature yet, but what we answer is always, well, you told me about your digital presence, which is good, but that doesn't tell me about your digital strategy. You know, strategy, you need to go back to the fundamentals. Strategy is a set of actions you take to achieve a certain objective. Now, if you're not capable of telling me what objective does your Weibo space fulfill, does your Tmall space fulfill, and how are you using each of these digital touchpoints to create a certain type of customer journey, then you don't have a digital strategy. You may have a great digital presence, a very comprehensive coverage, but if each of the touch points, each of the building blocks of that presence don't contribute to creating a certain type of customer experience, then I wouldn't call that a strategy.
So if having a digital presence doesn't mean having an innovative digital strategy, then what would be a good innovative strategy then? Give me an example.
Well, the way we work at Labbrand when we tackle digital projects is that we use a standard branding framework. So we see branding as being a core positioning that's projected across 4 dimensions. So you have products and services, what do you sell? Market and consumers, who do you sell to and how do you sell it, through channels, communication, and culture and behavior. Now, right now, most people use digital only on the communication dimension of things. But we feel that a really innovative digital strategy is one that uses technology to create innovation on each dimensions. I'm going to give you a few examples. For example, consider products and services. Consider the Nike Plus, for example. That's not marketing. That's something that directly impacts the value you're going to get as a consumer from buying a Nike shoe. Consider also marketing consumerism. How do you sell things? So when it comes to that dimension, a lot of people say, well, I'm doing e-commerce. What they're really doing is e-distribution. They're using online channels to perpetuate old models. But what we say is that you need to go beyond e-distribution to create completely new ways of finding and buying products. For example, a good example that I like is what Vankel did with the Vankel Star program. We have these like micro-influencers who create their own blogs on Vankel. And if customers find Vankel products through these blogs, these influencers get a cut of a sale. That's a brand new way for customers of finding products based on a multitude of micro-influencers. So that's way beyond just e-commerce. In that category, you also have injecting digital in the point of sale experience. Then communication, obviously that's where people use digital the most. But even there, you have a need to go beyond traditional models. For example, to think beyond a campaign by campaign basis and think about how do we achieve ongoing content excellence to integrate different types of content into your brand mix. For example, micro movies, GIFs, etc., etc. And another very important dimension that's often overlooked is culture and behavior. So how do I use digital to improve the way I function as a company? So a good example of that is using social media data for ongoing market research. That's something we try to integrate into our client's organization. That is building the processes that integrate social media data on an ongoing basis into the way the company sets its strategy, and that a lot of time saves the need for conducting periodically things such as focus groups, etc., because it gives you a real-time view of what's going on in your market. Another example of how digital can influence how you work as an organization is co-creation. So instead of just having people in the lab designing products, you co-create products with your consumers, because simply speaking, digital channels give you much bigger freedom to do things like that.
What you're saying right now is that in order to make an innovative digital strategy, you need a long-term plan, a coherent plan, and also the cooperation between different teams, among different teams within a corporation. So is that why we don't have innovative digital strategy for some brands at the moment? Is that the biggest reason for it?
It's one of the reasons, certainly. It's one of the reasons. If you look at the way most companies are structured, digital is either non-existent or it's under traditional marketing. And it's often the poorer brother of traditional marketing. The other problem is that digital people never speak to market research people. They never speak to, for example, sales reps. They never speak to product design people. So you end up in a situation in which digital is only used for tactics such as email marketing, of the odd push Weibo posts, etc., etc. So organization is certainly one big obstacle. Knowledge, and I guess this is also linked to organization, but knowledge is also one big obstacle. In fact, people, for example, let's say somebody who works in product or service design, if these people are not knowledgeable of what digital can achieve, how can they integrate the newest technology into the kind of customer experience we want to create through the product or service? For example, I was talking about Nike Plus earlier. Nike Plus would have been impossible if the people designing the Nike shoes were not aware of what was possible with mobile.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor and hear from Stella Jamie Lui, General Manager of Digital Innovation at Carat China, about opportunities created by digitalizing everyday objects.
Now, let's go!
Now, digitization of everything is literally one of the most impactful trends that I'm seeing right now, and it is empowered by decentralization of consumer technology. Now, you have found so many inspiration in this year's CES show in Vegas in January, and they are not limited to wearable technology. Sensorization is infiltrating us in so many ways. These are embedded abundance of opportunities for us to create digital innovations from them for communication. And what makes the communication business now so challenging and fun is how we also leverage on the element of real time using, for example, like the camera sensors, the accelerometers, gyroscope, and microphones that are now so commonly found in our everyday life. In fact, most of the time when you see consumers, they are holding it, it's in their pockets, in their bags. Now these sensors, they gather contextual data, and with the right application, put them in the right environment of everyday objects. This is the potential birth of your digital innovation. Now, I'm a fan of simplicity, and I love communication that's integrated with consumers' daily lives. Living in both Singapore and Shanghai, where the tempos are super fast, I like to explore into micro experiences, which become a very interesting area for me to find innovation opportunities. Now, vending machines are an integral part of commuting or people on the move, and to facilitate these micro conveniences. So starting with a simple idea in our head, a full business plan was developed to digitize the vending culture and to provide a unique micro experiences to consumer. This gives birth to the Magic Box, which is the first whimsical vending machine in the world that integrates social communities and m-commerce purchases, allowing fulfillment to take place not just as you're buying from the machine itself, but across cities, thus creating a magical microtransaction experience.
Thanks, Stella. We're in the studio today with Kevin Gentle, talking about innovation. Well, Kevin, give me an example of an industry whose operation is based on its business model and practice that makes no sense in the digital age.
You have quite a few examples. There's one that I think is very telling. It's a small example, but as a man, every time you go to get your hair cut to the hairdresser, the first 10 minutes are spent explaining these people what you want. But I've been there before. I've been to your hair salon 10 times before, and you're still asking me what I want. Why don't you just snap a picture, and then every time I come back, you can save these 10 minutes because you already know what I want. Now that's a small example, but it's very telling. It affects directly the type of service experience that I get. And through this very simple innovation, you could completely change my experience as a consumer. Another good example is the hospitality industry, and we work with a lot of hospitality brands at Labbrand. If you look at the entire customer journey right now, a lot of things are based on perpetuating old models from the pre-digital age, but should be changed. For example, why are room rates so opaque? Why is it so difficult to compare room rates? It should be much easier. Why can I just choose a certain type of room? I want to choose the exact room, and we've done that research with Chinese consumers, and they ask, I want to choose the exact room, the room number with the room location. That should be possible. When looking at room photos, why do you have these generic photos? I should be able to see pictures of that exact room. Again, that is completely possible. Why do I need to wait at a counter to check in, where I could just do self-check-in? Loyalty programs, why are they just so damn complicated? When I book a room, why do I need to give you my address when I book a room? The reason is because the brand wants to sell me physical
information,
mail.
Yeah.
And so on. Why do I need to order room service for the phone? Well, I know more and more hotels are integrating iPads, but we still have a long way to go. So for me, as a consultant, as a strategy consultant, every time I go to a hotel, 80% of the time, I cannot help but spotting all along the way small things that could make that journey so much better. And I think that the key question is for brands to ask themselves, if my industry was reinvented today with absolutely no legacy models, what would it look like? And for a lot of industries, it would look nothing like what it looks like today. And I think and that's a tough exercise, because it means going against practices that go decades back. But it's a necessary exercise.
Yeah, it's like telling somebody to tear off the roof and tear down the walls, essentially. So it seems like maybe digital is too powerful a tool for brands to fully utilize then. Do you agree with that? Or in other words, I mean, there seems to be this gap between the opportunity and the approach. How do we fill the gap?
It's a good question. I think in the way brands tackle digital, in the way brands plan with digital investment, as I said earlier, the big problem is that strategy and customer insights are not integrated. So what we always do is having a very simple step, like step 0 of digital strategy. What are the objectives of my brand, and what type of customer journey? What do I want to create? And by simply integrating customer insight and strategy into the equation before planning digital spending, suddenly you will see that the conclusions you get to will be very different. But for me, I'm an optimistic. I just think we at a period of transition right now. where knowledge and best practices and organizations and models just need to catch up with customer sophistication. And we'll get there, a lot of brands are getting there, and what people like me are trying to do is just like accelerate this transition.
What you say to me makes perfect sense. You know, consider yourself a customer, walk through the customer experience, and then try to incorporate that experience, what can be bettered, for example, into a strategy. How come brands are not doing that?
It's a good question. It goes back, I think, to knowledge. It also goes back to the fact that a lot of senior marketers have the bulk of experience in the era of push media, the 80s and the 90s, which according to me is a pure anomaly. So they all a lot of them try to cling on to these old push media models, trying to track views and exposure instead of tracking interactions. And it is a big problem with knowledge, but again, I think we'll get there pretty quickly.
Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Youku, Tudo, and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo, WeChat, and Twitter, and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.